He is already upside down when the crowd finds its breath, ankles cinched in rope that bites deeper each time his body sways, the knot set with the same care used for counting coin. His bare back is a map of bruises, dark blooms on pale skin, shoulders pulled long by gravity, hands bound behind him so tight the fingers have gone waxy and still. The saw is not raised like a weapon. It is held like a tool that has done this before, iron teeth dull enough to grab, sharp enough to keep going. When the executioner adjusts his grip, leather creaks, and a thin rain of frost shakes loose from his sleeve, drifting down onto the condemned man's face as if the sky itself is trying to cool what is coming. The square is a bowl of stone and timber, a place built to hold noise, yet it holds silence better. A clerk stands near the scaffold with a parchment that flutters like a trapped wing, his ink-stained fingers pinching the seal as though the seal could bleed. Guards keep their spears angled low, not to threaten the crowd, but to remind them where the line is. The condemned man's eyes do not search for mercy. They search for distance, for anything that is not the iron line waiting under him. His mouth opens, not for words, only for air, and the air is cold enough to hurt. The first pull does not come with drama. It comes with weight. The executioner sets the blade to flesh where the body is softest, and he leans back with the practiced economy of a man sawing wet wood. The sound is wrong, not a scream, not yet, but a wet rasp, a vibration that passes through bone and into the scaffold's beams. The condemned man's spine arches, his abdomen tightens, and his whole body tries to become smaller, as if shrinking could slip him free. The crowd shifts in one shared movement, boots grinding on grit, a ripple of coats and hoods. No one speaks. No one needs to. In the ledger of the city, this is not called cruelty. It is called sentence. In the halls behind the square, where stone corridors hold the smell of tallow and damp wool, men in fur-trimmed robes have already decided that the body must be broken in a way that cannot be forgotten. They have decided that fear must be taught with a shape, and the shape today is a hanging man and a saw. The clerk will later write the hour, the charge, the method, the costs, rope, timber, iron, and the small fee paid to the executioner for cleaning his tools. The page will remain. The scream will not. Years later, a traveler will swear he saw the same scaffold outside Nuremberg, the same inverted posture, the same saw drawn slow to prolong the lesson. He will say the crowd prayed, and he will be corrected by a woman who lived near the square, who says there was no prayer, only counting, only waiting, only the sound of teeth. In Vienna, a novice scribe will copy an old account and stain it with new ink, adding details he never witnessed, adding a line about the condemned man's eyes rolling back in piety. In Istanbul, a merchant will tell a different version, claiming the condemned were drugged, claiming mercy hid inside bitterness poured down the throat. The story moves across borders the way plague does, carried by mouths, by wagons, by the restless need to believe that horror belongs somewhere else. The executioner keeps his posture steady, knees slightly bent, shoulders loose, breath controlled, because fatigue is the enemy of precision. The condemned man's blood begins as a thin dark thread, then becomes a slick warmth that runs upward along his abdomen due to his inverted body, staining him in a slow reversal. The saw teeth catch on sinew, pause, then break through with a jerk that makes the man's entire frame quiver. A single breath breaks into two broken breaths. The crowd hears that split, and some flinch as if struck. Whispers spread that the saw is older than the city, that it came from a battlefield where it was used not on timber, but on prisoners taken at dusk. It is said the iron was quenched in brine mixed with grave dirt, so the blade would hunger, so the teeth would never dull. The older women in the crowd touch small charms, bits of wood, bone, dried herb, not to save the man, but to keep his fate from sticking to their sons. The guards pretend not to notice, yet one of them shifts his weight and glances down at his own wrist as though checking for an invisible mark. What cannot be disputed, however, is the way the body responds when the blade continues. The condemned man's muscles begin to tremble in waves that cannot be controlled, each wave a surrender. The sound changes as the saw reaches denser structure, a rougher resistance, then a faint grinding as teeth meet bone. The executioner pauses only to adjust the angle, a small act of technique that keeps the blade from binding. His face remains half shadow, expression reduced to function. He does not look at the man's eyes. He watches the line of the cut, the path that must be followed. Somewhere beyond the square, bells ring for the hour, indifferent to the lesson being carved into flesh. Inside a nearby tavern, men who will never come to the scaffold drink thin ale and complain about taxes, while the city's tax is being paid in blood a few streets away. In a narrow room above a shop, a child hears the faint rasp carried on wind and asks a question no one answers. The sound makes its own language, and the city understands. Later, in a court record kept in a monastery outside Bamberg, a margin note will appear in a different hand, claiming the condemned man did not die from the saw, that he survived long enough to be questioned again, that his lips moved with the confession written by the clerk before it was spoken. The monk who reads it decades later will frown, because the main text says the man expired before the blade reached the sternum. The contradiction will remain, because contradictions are the seed of legend. When a method is too brutal to be absorbed, the mind edits it, stretches it, makes it stranger, or makes it bearable through lies. The condemned man's face swells with blood, veins standing out at his temples, eyes bright and wet. His jaw clenches until the muscles knot, then releases in a spasmodic shake. A line of saliva drops toward the stones, followed by another drop, each one slow, each one a small proof that he is still alive. The executioner draws the saw again. The pull is longer now. The blade sings with friction. The condemned man's ribs begin to shift under pressure, an internal movement visible through the skin. The crowd sees the body changing shape, becoming less human, more object, a structure being dismantled. In the days that follow, even those who did not attend will claim they smelled it. The iron scent that clings to cold air, the pitch smoke, the sharp sourness of fear. A butcher in the market will cut through cartilage and pause, suddenly remembering the sound, and he will set his knife down as if the blade has become foreign. A priest will preach about sin without naming the scaffold, yet everyone will picture it anyway. A judge will sit at his table, fingertips pressed together, and feel a small satisfaction that the city has been reminded who owns the bodies within its walls. In Prague, a rumor will grow that the condemned man's blood ran uphill into the saw teeth and stained them black forever, and that any carpenter who borrows the blade will find his wood splitting wrong, as if the iron refuses honest work. In the countryside, people will insist that an inverted death keeps a restless spirit from finding the road to God, that hanging a man upside down traps his soul in the earth, forcing it to crawl through roots and worms. A midwife will warn a young mother not to let her infant sleep with the head lower than the heart, not on a night when the wind shifts, not when the moon is thin, because the world remembers what it has seen and repeats it in smaller ways. The clerk, when he returns to his desk, will wash his hands and still see red in the creases. He will sharpen his quill, and the scratch of it on paper will sound too much like teeth. He will write the word for saw, and his hand will hesitate, as if the letters themselves are sharp. He will not confess this hesitation to anyone. In the machinery of authority, hesitation is a flaw that can become a charge. The executioner will clean the saw with hot water and ash, scraping away tissue from the teeth with a small bone-handled tool. He will not hurry. He will not look away. He will do the work the same way he does every time, because routine is the only shield against what his hands are used for. His apron will darken where blood has soaked in, a stain that never fully leaves. In some cities, they say executioners cannot be buried in consecrated ground. In others, they say the earth rejects them, pushing their coffins up after winter freezes. The executioner has heard these tales and does not correct them. Fear is useful, and he lives by what people will not touch. When the condemned man finally stops moving, It will not look like peace. It will look like the body giving up the argument. The saw will have made its long claim through flesh, through bone, through the stubborn architecture of a human being. The crowd will not cheer. A few will vomit quietly into sleeves. Others will blink hard, as if waking from a dream that has left their skin cold. The widow will turn away first, her wooden charm clenched so tight it leaves a pattern in her palm. She will go home and scrub her hands until they sting, as if washing can change what her eyes have taken in. Yet the punishment does not end when the body is removed. The scaffold remains, wood damp with what no rain can erase. Children will play near it days later, daring each other to touch the post, then running away, laughing too loudly because they are afraid. A dog will sniff the stones and whine, tail low, then bolt as if chased. In the weeks after, a thief will be caught and dragged before the same court, and when he hears the word for the method, he will lose control of his bladder before the sentence is fully read. The city will call that justice working. In a different season, when snow covers the square and makes everything clean, a visiting magistrate will mention the punishment as proof of the city's strength. He will speak of deterrence, of order, of necessary severity. He will not speak of the sound, because the sound cannot be made respectable. He will not speak of the moment when the condemned man's breath broke into smaller pieces. He will not speak of the way the crowd listened like witnesses at a funeral for their own illusions. There are those who will insist the worst part is the blade, and there are those who will insist the worst part is the waiting, suspended, inverted, blood pressing into the skull, every heartbeat a hammer. The condemned man lived in that waiting, in the minutes before the first pull, in the knowledge that the city had chosen a slow truth. The punishment begins when the ropes tighten. The saw only completes what authority has already started. A chronicler in a distant abbey will later write that the method was reserved for traitors, for men whose crimes threatened the stability of the realm, and that it was rarely used because it offended God. His ink will be careful, his language solemn. But in the margins, another hand will add a quiet correction, used more often than they admit, applied when the court needed a spectacle, when a rebellion was rumored, when a pamphlet circulated, when a judge wanted to prove loyalty to a prince. In the Holy Roman Empire, courts learned that terror travels faster than decrees. In border towns, where loyalties shift with trade and war, the scaffold became a form of diplomacy. Even after rulers publicly condemned such punishments, even after proclamations promised reform, the method lingered in the shadows of enforcement. It moved from central squares to outskirts, from noon to dawn, from public theater to controlled warning. The saw might be replaced by another device, another cruelty shaped for another decade, but the principle remained. The body would be used as text. The crowd would be forced to read. There's a final rumor that returns like a bad smell. It says the condemned man did not die when the saw reached his chest, that his heart continued to beat in a broken cavity, that his eyes stayed open, watching the ground as if searching for a place to land. The same rumor claims the executioner heard a whisper from the inverted mouth, not words, just a sound that matched the saw's rhythm, and that this sound followed him home, lived in his walls, scraped at his sleep. Many believe this is a myth rather than documented fact. Yet the executioner's house on the edge of the city was avoided for years, and when he died, people said his coffin was heavier than it should have been. In the end, the city keeps its records, its seals, its confident handwriting. It keeps the scaffold until it rots, then replaces it. It keeps the saw until it breaks, then commissions another. It keeps the memory in a place deeper than speech, in the way men lower their voices when they pass the square, in the way mothers grip a child's shoulder when a guard walks by, in the way a clerk pauses before writing a sentence that turns a living body into an example. And somewhere beyond the walls, on roads lined with bare trees, travelers continue to carry the story, changing details, moving it from one court to another, giving it new names, new charges, new victims, because the truth is too heavy to hold in one shape. If a city can teach obedience with iron teeth and silence, what does it do when the silence is no longer enough?